you. Well, let's get started this morning. My name is Cassie Rose, and I'm the Program and Advocacy Coordinator here at Rogue Valley Council of Governments Senior and Disability Services. Just good morning and welcome. Today, we're taking a fresh approach to this annual event. In the spirit of collaboration and advocacy, community-based organizations are taking part in this dialogue for the very first time. Our goal of the Legislators Dialogue today is to create a community conversation and to continue to build upon the highly valuable collaborative relationships that we have with local officials, legislators and their teams, and community partners. So thank you all for taking the time to be here with us today. We believe that today's event will help foster a climate of purposeful inclusion of all people, and we hope that this environment is one where we all feel safe, valued, cared for, and given an opportunity to form meaningful relationships. Here's our run of show that's in the chat as well. That was a great idea, Connie. We have new leadership here at Rogue Valley Council of Governments, so we'll start with some introductions. Then our director will provide you with a 30,000-foot view of our latest programs and initiatives that support older adults and people with disabilities in Jackson and Josephine counties. We'd like to talk also about our recent collaborative advocacy efforts and highlight many of those of you that are community-based organizations in the room. And we'll also dive into an interactive dialogue with our honorable legislators and their staff. There'll be an opportunity for elected officials to share and engage in a dynamic dialogue, and for community-based organizations on the call to share some of your thoughts and work. We'll end the morning by looking to the future and discuss ways that we can build stronger relationships moving forward to best serve and advocate for older adults and people with disabilities in Oregon. We acknowledge that our lives are back-to-back Zoom meetings, as Representative Marsh is zooming in the car right now. With that in mind, we like to apply the following community agreements to the day. Stay on topic and be brief. Clarify the who that you are speaking for, whether that be yourself or a larger constituency. Share airtime with one another, listen without interrupting, practice respect for each other, seek to find common ground, and please, if you can, use Zoom tools such as chat or the raise hand function. And also please follow the chat to look for some time cues. My teammate Donovan is helping with some technical support today and will help manage background noise if needed. And then our Senior Advisory Council member, Natalie Metler from Ashland Parks and Recreation Senior Services Division, will be monitoring the chat and providing some time cues there. I would like to introduce Anne-Marie Alfrey. Anne-Marie has been with Rogue Valley Council of Governments since January of 2015, filling roles with Human Resources Manager, Internal Services Director, and Deputy Director prior to becoming our Executive Director in June of this year. She also has more than 20 years of experience in organizational leadership in manufacturing and service industries. Outside of her work at Rogue Valley COG, Anne-Marie's volunteer service includes acting as Vice President and Secretary on a local nonprofit board. And now Anne-Marie will say a few words.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. And it's nice to meet those of you I have not Zoomed with quite yet in my new role. Just really quickly, an overview of Rogue Valley Council of Governments, also known as RVCOG. We are a voluntary association of local governments in Jackson and Josephine counties. We are the area agency on aging for Jackson and Josephine counties. And under that umbrella, we have two departments: senior nutrition, providing Meals on Wheels and congregate meals for seniors in our communities, and also senior and disability services, who are the featured spotlight program of today's presentation. Just to go full circle on Rogue Valley Council of Governments, our other departments also include natural resources, community development, transportation planning, land use planning, And we have technology and administrative services available to our member jurisdictions. And back to you, Cassie.
Thank you so much. Okay. Next, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our new Senior and Disability Services Director, who is serving in what she likes to call her rookie year. The Reverend Constance Wilkerson is a strong advocate for vulnerable and underserved populations. She has worked on behalf of those experiencing homelessness, persons of low income, older adults, people with disabilities, and the LGBTQ+ community for more than 25 years at regional, state, and local levels. Currently, she serves as our Senior and Disability Services Director for our local area agency on aging, like Anne Marie talked about here in Jackson and Josephine counties. Connie's going to provide us with a service snapshot in just a few minutes. But first, I'd like to recognize our volunteer leaders that really help us shape our policy and develop our area plan through their service. On today's call, we have the chair of our Senior Advisory Council, Rhonda Lawrence, the chair of our Disability Services Advisory Council, Mr. John Curtis, and we have the chair of our joint SAC-DSAC Advocacy Committee, Ms. Liz James. Also, thank you to all of the other SAC and DSAC members that are in attendance today. We will be sharing volunteer leaders' biographical information with you all in a follow-up email. We are also very honored to have so many representatives on the call today from our community-based partner organizations. Those people that serve seniors, people with disabilities, and advocates for the underserved. This slide is not an exhaustive list of our partners, and there may be a few others that were able to join in the call today as well. So again, we thank you and we appreciate your dedicated work. Oops. Connie, I am going to punt to you now to give us the 30,000-foot view of Senior and Disability Services.
Great, thank you, Cassie. Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity to discuss the needs of older adults and adults with disabilities here in Jackson and Josephine counties. At Senior and Disability Services, we strongly believe that together we can promote the dignity, quality of life, and self-determination of seniors and people with disabilities. I would like to begin with a few statistics to explain why we offer the services we do. As you are all aware, the U.S. is an aging nation, and over the next decade, the number of older adults will dramatically increase as the youngest baby boomers will reach the age of 65. And in just 9 years, 20% of Americans will be age 65 or older, and that's a number that is twice what it was in the year 2000. And by 14 years from now, for the very first time in our nation's history, older adults age 60 and above will outnumber people who are younger than the age of 20. As a state, Oregon's senior population is higher than the national average. We are in aging Oregon. 24% of Oregonians are age 60 plus. 12% of all Oregon households consist of adults ages 65 and above who live alone. 36% of Oregonians age 65 and above have a disability. And 27% of Oregonians age 65 and above live in rural areas. Southern Oregon has even more of an aging trend. Statewide, 18.2% of Oregonians are 65 or older. And in Jackson County, that percentage increases to 22.6%, and in Josephine County to 26.4%. Most people, as you can imagine, want to age safely in their homes and stay in their communities. According to one recent AARP survey, 86% of adults age 65 and older say that they hope to stay in their homes for as long as possible. To do so, many people will eventually need some level of service or support to live safely and successfully in their home or community. Community infrastructure is a critical component of healthy aging, and enabling aging in place is essential to our economic stability and the overall welfare of all individuals. Many individuals with dementia require high levels of support, particularly in the middle and later stages of the disease's progression. Currently, almost 6 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common form of dementia. 88% of individuals with dementia need assistance with self-care activities, such as bathing and dressing, mobility, and household activities, which means intensive work on behalf of the caregiver, who is generally an unpaid family member or friend that is assisting that individual to remain in his or her own home. Only 20% of people with dementia live in care facilities, and an alarming 25% live alone. The statistics I have just shared demonstrate the growing number of people in our communities here in these two counties who will need supports and services to remain as independent as possible for as long as possible. Fostering this independence through services, education, and resources is an overarching goal of senior and disability services. This goal of helping people to remain as independent as possible for as long as possible not only meets the person-centered goal of independence, but also saves state and federal funding that would be utilized to provide care in a long-term care facility or with in-home services through Medicaid. Our programs here at Senior Disability Services are meant to address people's needs at the earliest time that the need presents itself, and to do so in the least expensive way possible. These programs promote healthy behaviors, connect people with resources before they are in crisis, and support people in ways that allow them to stay in their homes for as long as possible. I'm going to highlight just a few of our programs. Our Veterans Directed Care is a self-directed alternative for veterans who are in need of long-term care. Senior and Disability Services operates this program in partnership with the local Veterans Administration. Veterans hire their own in-home care provider instead of moving into a VA facility. They manage their own caregivers through this funding. This funding also allows them to pay for alternative therapies, adaptive equipment, home remodels, and other important and life-improving services. Our Senior and Disability Services has the largest veteran-directed care program of all the area agencies on aging in the state of Oregon. A second program, Oregon Project Independence, is a state of Oregon program that funds in-home care and service coordination for people who do not quite qualify for Medicaid. OPI helps adults stay in their homes when they can no longer take care of their own daily needs without assistance. Senior and Disability Services staff provide case management, coordinate personal care workers and home care workers, and home delivered meals. Lastly, I'll talk about some of our caregiver programs. Many people are able to stay in their own homes because of family caregivers. Family caregiver is the term we use to describe individuals who care for a family member or a friend without receiving pay, and they often provide these services full-time. SDS offers a number of support programs for these caregivers, such as the Powerful Tools for Caregivers training. This gives people a chance to meet with other caregivers, to share their circumstances, their stresses, their joys, and to learn how to diffuse stress and how to care for their own needs. Our Star C program is a one-on-one coaching model for the caregiver. especially for those who are assisting people living with dementia. We also offer funds for the family caregiver to obtain respite for a few hours a day or even for a few days at a time. Many of you are familiar with our Aging and Disability Resource Connection. This is a statewide information, assistance, and referral phone line and database. Our trained staff answer calls for both Jackson and Josephine counties. And the ADRC you can think of as an enhanced 211 style of system for older adults and adults with disabilities, or for anyone who needs information to assist older adults or a person with a disability. Our Lifelong Housing Initiative has the goal of increasing accessible housing in our area. It educates builders, realtors, and other professionals on how to construct homes that are safe for all ages to live in. Our disaster registry is a database of people who have applied to be in that registry because they cannot evacuate their homes on their own or stay in their home for up to 3 days in the event of an emergency. More than 600 people are currently in the disaster registry database. Senior and Disability Services, as Anne Marie mentioned, functions as the local area agency on aging, and our service area covers both Jackson and Josephine counties. In addition to providing essential services, area agencies on aging play a responsible role in assessing community needs and developing area plans to address those needs. Although the Older American Act requires that area agencies on aging target their programs to those with the highest economic and social need, all individuals who are age 60 and above are eligible to receive Older American Act services if funding is available. While we are guided by our 4-year area plan, we also address emerging community needs, such as the growing need for mental and behavioral health supports. There are 5 core Older American Act services that all area agencies on aging must offer. We've talked a lot about our supportive services. Our nutrition services are overseen by Food and Friends, who in pre-pandemic time have both congregate meal sites and home delivered meals, and have continued to make sure that nutrition needs of older adults are met during the pandemic. Our health and wellness programs contain some of our health promotion programs, such as diabetes prevention and chronic disease self-management programs. We've talked already a bit about our family caregiver services, and our elder rights include legal services and elder abuse prevention. In our 4-year area plan, we prioritize the need to offer mental health services, and Senior and Disability Services provides 2 mental health support programs, PEARLS and OPAL. Social isolation and loneliness have increasingly been recognized as important issues among older adults. 43% of older adults report feeling lonely, and 27% reported feeling isolated from others in times before the pandemic. In addition to reducing quality of life, loneliness increases the risk of health problems, loss of function in terms of self-care and mobility, and shorter life expectancy. Having fewer social connections has also been linked to an increased risk of dementia. This graphic, if it will load, there we go, indicates all of the programs that Senior and Disability Services currently operates. Our staff has had to be very nimble in the delivery of responses to emerging needs, such as the COVID pandemic and wildfire responses. For example, we saw our disaster registry placed into action during the September 2020 wildfires here in our valley. And SDS staff and disaster registry volunteers were able to contact more than 220 vulnerable persons, especially in the Phoenix, Talent, Cave Junction, and surrounding areas. Many of those vulnerable persons did not know a wildfire was raging very near their homes, but only 2 of them needed emergency management services to safely evacuate, and we were able to arrange that safe evacuation for those 2. The pandemic has taken a toll on mental health, especially for older adults. As you can see, 60% of older adults reported just last fall that they had experienced social isolation, and many reported experiencing stress, anxiety, sadness, loneliness, and feeling overwhelmed. In response to social isolation and loneliness, our staff here developed an evidence-informed program called OPAL, Options for People to Address Loneliness. Using behavioral activation, action planning, and resource identification, OPAL counselors on our staff provide support and encouragement in order to help individuals reduce stress, anxiety, depressions, and feelings of isolation and loneliness. These counselors partner with the participants to address their problems and concerns. It's a brief intervention of 4 weekly sessions and 2 monthly follow-up calls. And this has all been conducted via Zoom and through telephone conversations during the pandemic. We recently received a grant from Oregon Health Authority to develop OPAL training materials so that this program can be replicated throughout the state, especially in rural areas where there are fewer mental health support programs and resources. Quickly, I'll just highlight other ways that we have had to quickly address emerging concerns. We unrolled our vaccination project in February, and by April, we're able to have 700 older adults and adults with disabilities become fully vaccinated against COVID. We did this through our wonderful aging and disability resource staff members, and the call volume sometimes exceeded more than 150 calls per day. At some points, we had more than 500 clients waitlisted for services, but we were able to get through all those lists and also arrange for in-home vaccination for homebound clients. Also, from time to time, when we see the need, we embark on special financial assistance programs, and we carried one out in December. We were aided by a community partner, Jackson County Mental Health, and were able to give all these forms of assistance. It is truly our community partners that help us to meet basic needs. Through SDS grants to these partners, they are able to offer legal services, transportation, mental health programs, health promotion programs, and home repair and modifications. These are programs we would not be able to provide without our community partners. We also have to work together to meet basic needs through advocacy, and you'll be hearing a little bit more of that from Liz Jones in just a few moments. Locally, we do our advocacy work through our Senior Advisory Council, our Disability Services Advisory Council, and our joint SAC-DSAC Advisory Committee. At the state level, our advocacy is carried out through Oregon Association of Area Agencies on Aging and Disabilities. And at the federal level, it's carried out by U.S. Aging, formerly known as N4A. In conclusion, I want to highlight just a few of what we in SDS see as ongoing needs for legislative support. We need to maintain support services and housing opportunities for the 1,070 seniors identified as losing their homes in manufactured and RV parks during the September 2020 wildfires. We need to have continued state and federal funding to assist our long-term impact of the pandemic and the needs of our wildfire survivors. And this needs to go beyond CARES and American Rescue Plan funding. It's wonderful that all these funding streams are available to us at the moment, but we need to maintain and braid other funding sources to continue to address these long-term needs. We need continued funding for outreach to seniors and adults with disabilities who have vaccine hesitancy, and also outreach on booster information. We need creative solutions for the workforce shortage of our home healthcare workers and our personal care workers, without whom people will lose their ability to remain independent. We need to continue to promote our lifelong housing initiative and future forms of visitability bills. And lastly, we need to maintain and grow bipartisan support for the federal mental health access improvement bill. Thank you all for your attention today.
Thank you so much, Connie. Next, I want to welcome Liz James, Chair of our joint Senior Advisory Council and Disability Services Advisory Council's Advocacy Committee. She's going to speak about the power of advocacy and action with senior and disability services. Thanks, Liz.
And thank you, Cassie, and thank you to all of you for being here and joining us today. We're incredibly grateful. So let me just begin by saying good morning again. I'm Liz James. I always like to share my pronouns. They're she or they. And I am a member, as you've heard, of the Senior Advisory Committee for RVCOG SDS and the chair of the Advocacy Committee. And so the Advocacy Committee, again, you've heard, it's a joint committee of the RVCOG Senior Advisory Council and the Disabled Senior Advisory Council, DSAC and SAC. The Advocacy Committee focuses on engaging SAC and DSAC members and the community in legislative advocacy in support of aging and people with disabilities issues at a local, state, and national level. And I'm really delighted to share that we have 9 members of our committee, 5 of which are from Jackson County and 4 from Josephine. And I'd love to name them. Obviously myself, John Curtis, Richard Hoskins, Erica Berkemeyer, Tony Ellis, Paul Golding, Linda Johns, Ray McKenzie, and our SAC chair, Rhonda Lawrence. We're also wonderfully and ably supported by Cassie Rose, who is with us today, and she is the RVCOG SDS Program and Advocacy Coordinator. And at our monthly meetings, I'm delighted that our director, Connie Wilkerson, joins us to provide any updates relevant to the agency and legislation. And as I shared, our efforts include new and existing local, state, and federal policies. And I'd like to just kind of give you a broad view of that. So beginning with our federal focus that has been and currently is primarily on the Mental Health Access Improvement Act, which in the current legislative session is House Resolution 432 and Senate Bill 828. And it's a bill that amends Title 18 of the Social Security Act to provide for the coverage of marriage and family therapist services and mental health counseling services under Part B of the Medicare program. It expands the type of behavioral health therapist that can actually address what is a very, very critical lack of available providers in this country. Passage of that act would add 200,000 mental health practitioners nationwide. And it's important to note that currently more than 50% of Medicare beneficiaries seeking the services of a mental health counselor have been turned away. And when you look at seniors in rural areas, including places like Southern Oregon, we are the hardest hit in terms of lack of those resources. And I want to point out that John Curtis, who is our current DSAC chair and advocacy committee member, he was the prior chair, has really been this amazing champion for a period of about 20 years as this legislation has made it through multiple legislative sessions. And his effort includes developing an interactive mental health access improvement website that has been nationally recognized and used. And he has also been fundamental in developing and conducting relevant educational webinars for local area agencies on aging across the country and others. Most recently, a wonderful collaborative partner meeting was held with Senator Wyden's staff, and it resulted in a very good possibility that this bill will actually be included in the budget reconciliation bill. This is absolutely a very exciting development, and I bet everyone would agree with that. I will drop, once I finish, I'm going to drop a link to that website because I think it's an important resource for everyone to have. Now, when we look at our state focus, this includes tracking and advocating for bills. An example in the last session, thanks to Representative Marsh and her sponsorship and introduction, was a visitability bill. And the visitability bill was really part of what is stage 1 of our lifelong housing standards program that was developed by RVCOG, Senior and Disability Services, in collaboration with AARP. Now, although this bill did not make it to the finish line, we will continue in future sessions to champion this or similar legislation. There were, however, a number of bills that we supported that did make it to the governor's desk and were signed, and they included House Bill 2342A, which was Healthy Homes Program, and Senate Bill 199, which was a new advanced directive bill. Our local focus is and has been to track and monitor local issues, again, with a focus on aging and people with disabilities. Recently, this has included COVID-19 issues and response, including vaccine access and wildfires response and recovery work, including disaster preparedness. Now, I just wanted to close out to really share with you what our activities are in terms of our advocacy work. I mentioned we have monthly meetings. We track our local legislator communications through their e-news. So thank you for those on the call that provide those great updates in terms of the work that you do. We also attend events and town halls that our legislators produce. During sessions, we track federal and state legislation. We have this amazing bill tracker that we maintain and keep updated. And we advocate for legislation via letters, testimony, and we work to gain additional legislative bill support. We conduct advocacy education, including how to use OLIS, the Oregon Legislative Information System. And we host advocacy training, an advocacy training day for the RVCOG SDS General SAC members. And this year, to increase our knowledge and expand our capacity, we have really worked to expand our collaborative advocacy model and efforts. We have for some time done collaborative work on our federal work with the Mental Health Access Improvement Act. And some of those organizations include the National Board of Certified Counselors, the Mental Health Workforce Coalition, American Counseling Association, and others. From a state perspective, we do track the legislative priorities and efforts of partners, including O4AD and AARP, and where we can align and leverage those efforts, we do so. To continue and nurture our collaborative efforts and advocacy work, today we are really pleased to be part of hosting this session to bring these agencies and organizations, along with many others, together. So thank you all again for joining us. Thank the legislators, thank the community partners, and again, welcome and thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Liz. Okay, it looks like we still have Representative Morgan on the line, but I don't know if she's available to speak, but I see we still have Representative Marsh. Looks like she made it to her spot. And thank you, Senator Golden. And we also have some of Senator Ron Wyden's staff. So we're going to transition into the interactive dialogue piece and open the floor up to the elected officials that are in attendance now to share with us your agenda as it relates to the needs specifically for older adults and people with disabilities. We're going to ask that each of you spend about 5 minutes speaking to one of the following or any of the following 3 questions. What has been your work on behalf of older adults and people with disabilities? How do you continue to work to make Oregon more age-friendly and equitable? And what are some highlights from the last legislative session, as well as maybe some budget allocations moving forward that pertain to aging and people with disabilities? I'll start with Representative Morgan if she's available, but it's just past 9, so I'm not sure.
I'm here, but I'm trying to listen to my other meeting and I've got to jump, so I'll be quick. Thanks for having us here this morning. Just my background with RVCOG, I was a Grants Pass City Councilor from 2010 to 2015, and then I was a County Commissioner with Josephine County from 2017 to 20. And then this is my first legislative session. So I am new at this at the state level. I was on the housing committee with Representative Marsh. So we got to hear the visibility conversation start, but I know it was one of those things that all of us were kind of like, how would that work? And what is that? So I know we're going to have more dialogue about that. And I have been a legal guardian of an adult in the mental health system for the last 8 years, and it is a challenging time. She's in a stage of crisis right now, or heading that way, and we've gone through the roller coasters of all the levels of mental health, and so it's been interesting to be on the groundwork as somebody advocating for somebody in the system. I have also found myself just on a personal level advocating for 3 different people that as they were end of life and just trying to get them services. And it wasn't easy necessarily. Matter of fact, even with getting meals delivered to the home through the program we get in Josephine County with you guys, I contacted on a Thursday, said, well, we can't even interview till next Tuesday. And I said, can you deliver meals in the meantime so he doesn't starve? And they're like, nope, sorry. And matter of fact, he went back in the hospital that Monday and he died within a couple of weeks. And it was just one of those things of how do we remove barriers for getting the help to people as they're in the place. And I think the biggest lesson I've learned as a legislator is just being a resource networker. How do I connect people with the right people? Because I can't personally solve everything for each individual, but we can at least listen to where they're at and have that weigh on our minds as we're making our votes and engaging in legislation, but also just connecting people to the right services to remove the barriers so they can be as successful as they can. On a personal note as well, because that's really what life is, I guess, relationships and personal experiences. I lost my grandmother 2 weeks ago today, and it was important for us that she pass in her home. And so we discharged her from the hospital with her request and, gave the round the clock care the last couple of days of her life. And she was surrounded by loved ones. And I think that you're, sorry, I'm emotional, but I really applaud your efforts to honor that seniors want to be in their homes through their lives and all they've worked for, and to be in a comfortable and familiar environment is important. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. I got to say, the biggest thing I'm hearing from anybody in my district is about illegal marijuana and how it impacts people's homes and their neighbors. I was at breakfast at the Black Forest restaurant yesterday, which is all seniors. And the next thing I know is the entire dining room where I was at was engaged. One person recognized me and asked a question, and literally every table joined in the conversation of how it is impacting their lives. And many moved to Josephine County to retire or have worked their whole lives for what they have. And now it's impacted by the illegal cannabis. And so that was probably the biggest project that I worked on through the legislative process, and it will continue to be what I am still a part of, as I've been appointed to the task force for it and the rulemaking committee. So I don't know if y'all have any questions or not, but that was a quick little intro. So hi.
Thank you so much, Representative Morgan, for being here today and for sharing such personal pieces of the story. Miss Representative Marsh, can you speak to these 3 questions, please?
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much for the chance to be here today. I know that we all value this meeting on an annual basis to get together with you to hear what you are doing. It's always so impressive, as when Connie went through the list of activities, to remind us of all the important things that happen at Senior and Disability Services and the RVCOG. So as you have heard, I did carry a bill around visitability this year. It was a good exposure, I think, for my colleagues in the legislature to begin to think about this topic. We have a ways to go before we get support for the home builders who are very suspicious about alternative building codes or even alternative definitions that might be placed in the building code for communities to talk about. So we haven't found that pathway yet, but we will absolutely keep talking about it, because we know that as the population ages, and we certainly saw all that helpful data earlier in the presentation, that it is going to be all the more important that we build housing with that in mind, and are able to accommodate people as they age and as they have a variety of needs in their lives. Most of my work that's really relevant to our conversation today has to do with wildfire recovery and the seniors who lost their homes. Connie noted that we had about 1,000 seniors in Phoenix and Talent. In total, and you all probably know this data because we've talked incessantly about it over the past year, in the Alameda fire and in my district and in Senator Golden's district as well, we lost 2,500 homes. Of those, about 1,500 to 1,700 were in manufactured home parks. We know that 18 to 20 manufactured home and RV parks were totally or very largely destroyed. And that means that our most vulnerable populations, which had been living in those RV parks and manufactured home parks, that is our seniors, our working people, our Latinx population, have been scattered to the winds. And from the very first days, about a year ago, we've been working pretty incessantly to try to find those people, to try to get them good information, to try to help them through the recovery process. And now we are really faced with issues around rehousing. Our communities have started to come back. If you drive through Talent in Phoenix, you'll see that some people have actually already taken up residency in new and beautiful homes, and you'll start to see neighborhoods begin to take shape. But notably missing is our manufactured home sector. I know of one family that's back in a manufactured home in a park where they lived prior to the fire. And that's because they were able to buy one of the few homes that was not destroyed in the fire. So we are really shifting and focusing right now on the manufactured home sector. And during the legislative session, I passed a number of bills that were focused on manufactured homes. This has been an ongoing interest for me. Little did I know that it would have such relevance here in our own district. But we did pass bills in response to what had happened in the Alameda fire. That legislation included the rights of manufactured home parks to rebuild. We addressed the state manufactured home purchase program. We have a program that was established 2 years ago that will provide grants or forgivable loans to people who need to upgrade their manufactured homes from very old models to new energy efficient models. We passed legislation to make it very clear that that program is available in wildfire circumstances when you're not upgrading, but you're actually replacing a home that was destroyed. We also made a modification to indicate that that home grant program can be used in privately owned parks specific to the wildfire situation. The program was originally written so that it applied only to resident-owned parks or nonprofit-owned parks. When we looked at Alameda, we realized that all of the parks that burned were privately owned, and we needed to make sure the program was available to people to get back into those parks. So we passed legislation to make sure that that could happen. We also passed legislation to address what were some really confounding issues. It turned out when we had a wildfire and people's homes and parks were destroyed, that there was the law was pretty ambiguous around what the responsibilities or rights of either tenants or park owners were. So we passed legislation so that it will be very clear in the future. Basically, the law will now say that when you have a disaster like that wildfire, that the tenant's relationship ends on the day of the wildfire. That means the tenant should be refunded any money that's been prepaid in rent or security deposits. The tenant is not responsible for any aspects of cleanup. That was a huge issue and a burden on many of our older people as they were trying to sort that issue out. And it also means the tenant has no pre-existing right to return to that park. So we tried to set in the law the statutory changes that we thought would be important for rebuilding our manufactured home parks. Now we are really focusing on on the ground, trying to figure out how that is going to work. We are compiling databases of all the private parks that show what their plans are, which ones intend to come back, which ones are leaving the business. But we need to add to that a whole lot of detail to make that useful to our senior population to be able to figure out if they can come back. We need to know what the rents are going to be. We need to know what the requirements around those manufactured homes are going to be. We need to know what services are going to be offered. And we are pairing that, and we'll be doing please stay tuned if you're interested in this, because by mid-October, I'm going to be scheduling a webinar. Well, we'll have information about private parks. We'll have information about a couple of state options that may exist for people who want to come back to the communities. And we will have the most current information around the state manufactured home purchase program so that we can start to match up people who are displaced with the right parks and the right financing to actually get back in the parks. That said, we know this is not going to be easy. We are starting to hear, yesterday, I'll just share with you, I got an email, and this is not the first of these kind of emails, from a couple that in their 80s who were displaced from one of our manufactured home parks. They had the resources, fortunately, to order a new home. It's still in progress because all of you know there's a huge backlog in manufactured home production. But they expect to get it next spring. In the meantime, the park where they've contracted to return has decided that they are going to try to stick the new tenants with a whole bunch of expenses, things like sidewalks and driveways and lighting, expenses that by all practical purposes, most of us would consider infrastructure of the park. Certainly, you're not going to take the street light in front of your home with you if you move your vehicle. So we're trying to figure out if there are any resources or recourse available to tenants in this situation, because I think, from my point of view, it's crass exploitation of the park owners trying to impose on very vulnerable residents who want to come back to those parks. So we are working hard on that front. So I'll conclude there. I'm happy to talk more about some of the other questions. We did pass some really, I think, important legislation for the aging population, including telehealth, interpretation services for healthcare, and most significantly, perhaps a big investment in long-term care, including increasing wages, which is going to be certainly key to be able to keep people as workers in the foster care or long-term care sector. But I'm sure I've used up my 5 minutes, so I will stop there.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And you had a fabulous town hall earlier this week. So if at any time today you can post the recording to the link to the recording for that in the chat, that would be a great way to continue the work that you've shared so far today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Golden, can you speak to any of these 3 questions for us in about a 5-minute time period?
Thank you very much for the invitation. I just want to say how useful this session is and how quite amazing the presentations have been. When I saw Connie's slide that shows the satellite of services that SDS provides and is involved, I was pretty stunned in it. So I need this kind of informational session and more contact through the legislative session. The issues on the slide that you asked about really were enveloped in the larger issues that we had to deal with, rather than broken out specifically, because perhaps more than any other I know about, this past session was an emergency response session and a crisis response session. So Pam spoke some to the mobile home park, manufactured home park issues crises that came out of the fire that we had. And, she initiated, several pieces of legislation. She talked about some of them that were designed to get people back in their homes more quickly, to try to cut through some of the red tape and delay. And I was able to shepherd some of those in the Senate. I sit on Senate Housing, and we really did have there were a lot of things this session that were quite conflictual and difficult, but this wasn't one of them. We had the ears of our colleagues and were able to move those through. My primary responsibility for the whole session was chairing the Natural Resources and Wildfire Committee and developing the major omnibus wildfire bill. There were 2 kind of major initiatives. One was wildfire recovery from the 2020 fires, and the other was, what do we do going forward? how do we prevent or reduce the risk of these kinds of disasters going forward? And how do we make communities more resilient? So one piece of that, I had way too many parts to talk about today, but one piece that I think is quite important had to do with smoke mitigation. And these were not programs that we were able to get on the ground for this smoke season, but there are two major initiatives statewide that will address the needs, I hope, of vulnerable populations and seniors in particular. And one of those is clean air shelters, public facilities where people can go during the worst smoke incidents and stay and have some breathable air. And the other is subsidies of home filtration and possibly congregate living filtration systems when necessary, so that in these really difficult times, people can find adequate and acceptable indoor air. That's certainly not the answer to our wildfire problem, but it's a necessary remedy. And so that's one example of how our responses to the major issues really had to keep an eye on especially vulnerable populations. So that was one in the wildfire area. In the COVID area, really we've been, for more than this last session, for the special sessions last year in 2020, we have been trying to adapt to the changes in COVID and the sources of federal resources to assist in the COVID response, especially in the area of keeping people in their homes. So we had any number of measures designed to do that: moratoria, fine-tuning of the deadlines to adapt to when federal dollars were available. And one of our partners, especially on the Housing Committee, has been the Oregon Housing Alliance, which has kept us aware of the special needs of seniors when it comes to housing, and really how their particular isolation sometimes makes it even harder for them to access available information and resources. So our attempt to keep people in their homes, which was dynamic and adaptive because so much was changing so fast, and to keep landlords whole. There's no small number of seniors in the state who supplement their Social Security with modest income from one or two rental houses, and they were vulnerable to real economic damage during the eviction moratorium. So addressing their needs and keeping a special eye out for their needs was important, and I was able to do that through the help of the Oregon Housing Alliance. I have not directly been very involved in disability related legislation. I have an ally in the Senate whose 24/7 focus is senior and disability care, and that's Senator Sarah Geltzer Blowen. She got married recently, and you may know her as Senator Geltzer. She goes now by Senator Blowen. And whenever a disability issue came up, I turned immediately to her because she's on it and fierce and assertive and proactive. And I use her as a resource in the disability area and probably will again. I think behavioral health. As you probably know, we were able to make a much more substantial investment in behavioral health in a number of areas this last year because of federal ARPA dollars. And I believe our total investment was about $400 million. And what I don't know, I'm a member of the Full Ways and Means Committee, so I saw those go through. I'm not sure how, my assumption is that that's going to make more resource available for some of the behavioral health problems and challenges that you deal with. But I'd like to confirm that. I'd like to know what the funding that we just provided in the last session, as we enhance and try to take a more integrated approach to behavioral health, how that has or hasn't improve your ability to respond to behavioral health challenges. So that's one piece of feedback that I want, and just ongoing into the coming sessions, I'm hoping for more ongoing dialogue to be more aware of what SDS's needs are. Thanks for inviting me. This was really helpful.
Thank you so much, Senator Golden. We will have another opportunity to talk back and forth about some of that relationship development pieces and some question and answers at the end. So hopefully we can revisit that last point. We also have some support staff from U.S. Senator Ron Wyden's office on the line today. I have Rebecca and I believe Andrew. Do either of you want an opportunity to speak to work with older adults and people with disabilities specifically?
Hi, so my name is Bree Irish, and I'm actually the staff from Senator Wyden's office on the call today. So it's also, I just want to say, first of all, it's really great to be with folks from the Rogue Valley, which is, where I'm from in Oregon, grew up in Grants Pass. So it's really great to see all of you. And I think, as you know, Senator Wyden is a staunch advocate for especially seniors, from his very beginning with the Gray Panthers. And now, as Senator Wyden has taken the chairmanship of the Finance Committee specifically, there are some really key proposals that he's working on specifically for older Americans and folks with disabilities. First off, he's working with Representative Bonamici, Neal, and Casey to reauthorize the Elder Justice Act and specifically modernize it. And included in that act is money for long-term health workforce recruitment, which is something, I was a former home care aide. So I know how vitally that is needed because of the services that, home care aides specifically provide for folks with disabilities and seniors, enabling them to stay in their homes and live as independently as possible. Obviously, Senator Wyden's priority is drug pricing, especially, and for the ability for Medicare to negotiate drug prices for its members. That's a huge piece, obviously. And I won't bore you with droning on and on about Senator Wyden's priorities for folks, but he always fights for increased funding for home and community-based services, which is a huge boon for the state as well. But happy to chat with you all. I want to keep my comments short as to not take up too much time.
So appreciate you being here today. Thank you very much. Okay. So some really great things were certainly accomplished during the last session, and moving forward, we believe that it's critical to further extend the initial work and advocacy efforts, and to continue to promote partnerships with our communities that we serve, aging agencies, and of course, federal, state, and local policymakers. So we're committed to listening to the voices of experience in community, and we want to work together to identify challenges and strengths in order to continue to develop impactful strategies, programs, services, and resources to meet the needs of older adults. I want to give the floor now to the community-based organizations that are in attendance today. We invite any and all of you to speak to any of the following that you'd like to address today, but I'll just open it up. I won't call on anybody. There's no particular order. So please unmute yourselves. And if you would like to speak to or address one of these with Senior and Disability Services and with our representatives, senators, please do so. Oops, sorry about that.
Well, this is Andrea Meyer from AARP, and I'm happy to go on camera if that works and share a few of the things that we at AARP did in this last legislative session. Is that okay, Cassie?
Please do. Yes. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. So I'm the Director of Government Relations, and I appreciate the chance. I think a number of the issues have been discussed already by folks that we worked on: telehealth, visitability, reforming and updating the advanced directive forms that we're excited about. And briefly, We are working on prescription drug reform, both at the state level, and we're supporting what was an effort around prescription drug affordability board. And that ultimately we hope will allow drug prices to be set for those that are most expensive. It doesn't have the authority yet, but we hope in subsequent sessions it will. And we are at the federal level advocating, along with Senator Wyden and others, the important ability to negotiate prescription drug prices and reform there. In addition, we have been and will continue to work on the issues around age discrimination with older Oregonians. The federal law that prohibits age discrimination is separate and distinct from other federal laws around discrimination, race, gender, religion. And as such, the Supreme Court has analyzed it separately, and the ultimate situation is that it's much harder to prove age discrimination in Oregon and across the country than any other kind. And we are committed to making efforts to fix Oregon's law to level the playing field, so it is not harder to prove age discrimination. And I think as we deal with the pandemic and coming out of that, hopefully soon, unfortunately, we will see more instances of age discrimination in the workforce. Another area that we're really proud that we've been working on here in Oregon is what is family caregiver support. And this session, we helped secure $4.4 million with the governor's support and aging and people with disabilities advocacy to get to move into getting a federal waiver. It includes OPI, Oregon Project Independence, and a waiver on that, but a new family caregiver support program. And those resources, unlike OPI, would go to the family caregiver to help them be able to provide that caregiving to the loved one or a family member and the respite and resources and tools they need. And that is moving forward. The state has filed its 1115 waiver with the federal government, and AARP and other groups will continue to advocate for that. The last piece I just want to briefly touch on is one of the areas that we worked on this session in what I call reactive mode that we help push back on. And that was efforts to provide immunity to long-term care facilities from claims of negligence. So let me translate that into English. There were efforts in the medical and broad-based business communities to seek legal protection against lawsuits if they were negligent during a time of COVID. And we at AARP were strongly against any efforts to give that special legal protection to long-term care facilities if they are negligent, be it abuse or worse yet, death of a loved one. They need to be held responsible, just as they were before the pandemic and throughout. There were efforts to provide that protection to them, and thankfully those efforts died in the legislature, but we will continue to advocate against that. You know, when a loved one dies, the last thing a family member wants to do is go to court and sue, but sometimes that's critically important and necessary to prevent any ongoing negligence against other members and residents in facilities. So I will leave it at that, and thank you again for the opportunity to speak today and to hear what others are working on. It's been great. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea. The floor is totally open, so please, if you're an organization on the call today, pop in. And
this is Kristen Milligan, and I'm with Community Volunteer Network. And hello, Cassie, good to see you. And thank you so much for inviting community-based organizations to be a part of this conversation. And thank you so much for the representatives who have spoken to some of the issues surrounding our seniors. And I guess when I'm listening, I just wanted to express to those folks advocating for dollars and for real support going to seniors is I think that support from the state and federal levels are more important than ever. It feels like locally, and when we look at it feels like locally, when I've looked at where dollars are being spent and where services are being provided, I see that seniors are largely being overlooked at every corner. It feels like, as we look at our community in areas that need to be addressed. You know, there's a large focus on homelessness, which is incredibly important. But I think a piece of the conversation that's being missed is our seniors and our seniors that are facing homelessness. And as the population continues to grow and we have more and more seniors in our community, that if we're not supporting them and providing, you know, high levels of care and service and opportunities for those seniors to be safe in their homes and to have opportunities, I'm just, the state and federal resources are imperative for our area to be able to provide much needed services and support for our seniors.
Thank you so much, Kristen.
Hey, Cassie, this is Nicole with O4AD, and I just wanted to jump on really quickly. I apologize, I have to go to another meeting, but thank you so much for this forum. I think that RVCOG has done a tremendous job of revamping to make it relevant and present to the current time, and I really appreciate that, having participated in these before. As you know, O4AD is the member association. RVCOG is one of our members, and we really value the voice of your advocacy and your collaboration within your communities. You know, the legislators who are here today have all worked really hard to bring voice to some of the issues that we're talking about today, and we really look forward to working on that in the future. A little bit of what your just immediate before me speaker was saying, I think that one of the things that I'm really paying attention to is I think there's a really strong focus on equity, but I think equity has a lot of different definitions, and certainly a lot of the things that have been present in everyone's minds over the last year, but in Oregon also too, I think, you know, we have to look at it from a geographic perspective. think we have to look at it from age, from resources, socioeconomics, and certainly the voice of older adults and people with disabilities deserves to be elevated in those conversations and from that perspective. I'm from Douglas County originally. I understand that the state looks a lot different in a lot of different places, and we need to be able to listen to those different voices in a way that makes our services relevant in a lot of different areas. And I think that's going to be a really interesting conversation as we look at the issues of housing, as we look at the issues in the ability to access healthcare and long-term services and supports. Even the conversation around telehealth looks a lot different in a lot of different areas of the state. So I think that's going to be a really interesting conversation. I hope that RVCOG and your advocates can be a part of it as we all work together to continue to increase the opportunities for older adults and people with disabilities to be as, independent, as in charge of their decision making and safe as possible in our state. So I look forward to continuing to work with all of you, and thank you very much for offering this today.
Thank you, Nicole. Connie mentioned that our VDC, our Veteran Directed Care Program, is the largest program in the state. And we intend to do a better job with connecting with veteran organizations. Today, Troy Ferguson from the United Way serves as the Jackson County Veteran Association chair. And Troy's on the call today too. So I just wanted to, I recognize what you said, Nicole, and it goes along with some of our programming. So thank you for being here, Troy. I put you on the spot a little bit.
No, that's okay. I was getting ready to speak up anyway and actually speak to that particular program in general. First of all, I just want to thank Cassie and Connie, all of RVCOG, for putting this forum in today. It's extremely important to be able to meet with the legislators and folks that make these decisions on funding these vital programs. Now, I know that the state of Oregon itself, most states, provide very limited veterans programs, supports. Most of it is grants and others, but you do have these federal programs such as the Veterans Directed Care. It doesn't see a lot of the light of day. And so the fact that RVCOG actually has the largest program in the state is huge. Over the last 10 years or so, there's been a real trend in veterans healthcare to deliver those services more on the individual level and to have veterans have more of a say in how their care is received. And so I'm very happy that we finally have Cassie. She would be a participating member of the Jackson County Veterans Advisory Committee on a standing basis, so she can keep us up to date as these programs move forward and the care that you all provide to Jackson County veterans.
I think that we have about 2 more minutes. If there's one more organization that wants to share. I'll take the silence as we're going to move forward. Together with your voices and action, we can continue to develop a comprehensive approach to addressing the aging needs and health needs of older adults and people with disabilities in Oregon. So again, thank you for participating today. Connie talked earlier about the stats and we've all heard them, how the population of older adults will double by 2035. So it's going to take multiple organizations, community champions like all of you, a broad group of constituents to begin addressing these challenges and the opportunities that lay ahead for our rapidly growing population. With that, I want to turn it back to the legislators that are still with us, Senator Golden, Representative Marsh, and Bree from Senator Wyden's office. Please chime in as you see fit on any of these questions that are on the stage or on the slide here today. What partnerships can we help foster going into the next session? In your personal opinion, what's your advice on how we can best engage with you directly? How will redistricting impact your work? And how has the pandemic changed the way that you communicate with your constituents? And then what's the best way for us to continue to work with communicating with you moving forward? So please, if Senator.
I'll jump in. I need to move to another meeting, so I'll just take a minute or two. No change of any significance for me in redistricting. You know, the pandemic has put Zoom in all of our lives. There is some upside to that, especially for people who live this far from Salem who can testify in person when they, had to devote a couple days to that before. But I'm meeting people much less face to face, but being able to do Zoom offers an accessibility that wasn't there before. One thing that strikes me is I think it'd be helpful to hear from you very specifically before budgets get set. To the extent that you're able to assess proposed state budgets for the agencies and spending, and let my office have specific concerns you might have about the budget. That allows me to weigh in with the Human Services Subcommittee that I don't belong to, and bring a little more intelligence to the full committee that could be very helpful. So the most specific thing I think would be early indications of concerns or requests in connection with the Human Services budget. I want to thank you again very much. This has been a valuable hour plus, and I'm looking forward to more communication before the next session.
Thank you so much for being here today, Senator Golden. Representative Marsh, do you have any feedback on any of these, or did you have to step off?
No, I'm here. As I think for our district, as we think about the past year and a half, it's impossible to isolate the pandemic without also talking about the impacts of wildfire, because that's really been what's front and center for all of us, is the response to recovery from rebuilding after the wildfire. And I think the issue I would like to raise here and present to the group is the question of how do we communicate well, not only from legislative offices to my constituents, but how do we communicate as a community? I mean, this was an issue that really emerged in a very big way in the very few days after the fire, when we were trying to identify people, find out where they were, find out if they were okay, find out what they needed, and get them valuable information. In the beginning, a lot of that was happening electronically over emails, and our frustration then was that a lot of the internet crashed because of damage that was also incurred to those systems through the wildfire. Eventually, we got the electronics back up, and we were sending out emails and electronic newsletters to try to get people in this really critical information. And then we realized that simply relying on email and telecommunications was going to miss a big part of our audience, including many seniors who may not pay any attention to their email if they even have it. Absolutely look at their snail mail because that's the times in which they came up. So my office pivoted at that point, and we actually sent out a snail mail 51-cent mailing to 1,000 people whose names we were able to garner as residents in the manufactured home parks, because we realized we just had to find them and get them information about what their rights were and where they could access help, particularly around manufactured homes. I know that AARP and the Senior and Disabilities offices did a lot of telephoning. And then we had on top of that, for significant parts of people who were damaged in the wildfire, language issues. We tend to put out all of our information in English. And I think we've had a real come to moment around the importance of communicating particularly in our part of the world, in Spanish, and using ASL to make sure that we're really getting information out to people that we want to be able to touch. So the whole thing has really made me think about how we communicate and keep people connected in communities where we have kind of a very fractured communication system. Our newspaper means less than it did 20 years ago in terms of the people who see it. It's not, we tend to get our information from very different media sources. And I think when we're communicating with seniors in particular, we just have to be really thoughtful and strategic and think about all of the venues that are important for connecting with them, because we get news in so many different ways. And that has been a big takeaway for me post wildfire. And I think it's something that I need to think about in my own office, but even more so, it's really something that we need to think about as a community. How do we keep in touch? What kinds of communication devices do we use?
Thank you so much. I think so many of us can relate to that. I know Kristen Milligan over at Community Volunteer Networks working with low-income older adult volunteers in the foster grandparent program, and they came up with some incredibly innovative projects, including giving every single one of them a tablet and helping them connect to Wi-Fi and things like that during the pandemic. So very important, continues to be an issue. Well, with that, today's legislative dialogue was aimed at bringing together some of the voices of our elected officials and stakeholders in our community that serve older adults and people with disabilities to really, again, help advance local and regional action. With the spirit of advocacy and collaboration in mind, we want to use the rest of the time we have to open it up to questions and answers. Before we do a quick little poll at the very end, and then Rhonda, our Senior Advisory Council Chair, will close us out for the day. So I am going to take off my slideshow and open it up for question and answers. Somebody has their hand up. I've got, I don't know who was first. So John and Dawn, you guys can fight it out.
Dawn and I often fight it out. So I'm going to jump in first. I am calling from inside a COVID overflow unit. I'm one of those folks who had a breakthrough after getting the Johnson & Johnson. I had a breakthrough occurrence of COVID, and I'm now hopefully completing my 20th day. We'll be out of here soon. I wanted to give a shout out though to facilities such as this. I've never lived inside of a skilled nursing facility and have dreaded the thought of that, but I can't say enough to compliment the support staff that work tirelessly, often trying to manage very difficult behaviors and issues inside of these places. I think it's a forgotten piece of our long-term care advocacy that we sometimes tend to kind of say, hey, you know, we're all about this independent stuff, but sadly to say, there are lots of folks who will never be able to enjoy that kind of a lifestyle. So I wanted to do that. And the other thing I wanted to do is give a particular a shout out and praise, kudos to the legislature. This session, and I've been watching the legislative sessions, general sessions here for some time regarding the deaf friendliness for various bills that seem to present themselves. There have only been a few in prior legislatures, but legislative sessions. But this particular legislative session, there was a host of bills, and so many of those received favorable entertainment by you folks in the legislature. I just want to say thank you very much. We've been doing some advocacy down here on the local level, trying to improve effective communication for the deaf and hard of hearing so that they can have better communication inside of their healthcare settings. So again, thank you very much, and thank you so much for attending today's meeting.
Go ahead, Dawn.
I wanted to follow up on something that Kristen Milligan pointed out, and that is a large increase in the senior homeless population and the challenge of serving them, because if they're under if a person is under a CCO, Oregon Health Plan, they can receive and do receive support from our 2 CCOs in places like Hope Village or Foundry, which is coming up. But once they qualify for Medicare, they don't get reimbursed through the CCOs, because CCOs don't get reimbursed for that. And they don't really get help with Medicaid, because Medicaid only funds housing for people who meet the long-term care standards, which are increasingly becoming tighter and tighter over the years. So those people, there's no funding for them at Hope Village. And quite frankly, I'm very familiar with Hope Village, and it is becoming increasingly a large portion of their population are seniors who they get no funding for from the CCOs, and have extreme difficulty placing them out in the community, because once again, if they don't qualify for long-term care, Medicaid isn't going to take care of that cost, and they are people who have very limited income. So it's quite frankly becoming a crisis for places like Hope Village, and I suspect it will for Foundry Village. So we need to look at the state and our federal level, how we support homeless seniors who need a transitional housing, and how we provide housing for them. So thank you. And by the way, I want to thank the legislators for 1, attending, and 2, for all they have been doing this past couple years. I'm very impressed as somebody like John, who's watched this for many years. This has been one of the more active and helpful sessions in working with seniors. So thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Jeremy, I saw you pop on camera. Did you have something you wanted? Oh, you're just welcome. Good to see your face. Okay, well, we are about 3 minutes from the end of the day. I'm going to launch a quick little poll here on Zoom, and then I'm going to pass it over to Rhonda to close us out. Are you all seeing the poll pop up on stage? Oh, good, you are.
I just realized I'll share with others. It requires you to scroll through it. There's more than 2 questions before you can submit. Is that right?
Oh, thank you. I think I have a total of 3 out there. Very good. This is just some feedback for us for future events and advocacy. So thank you all very much. I'll end that now. Okay, Ms. Rhonda, Chair of our Senior Advisory Council, can you close us out for the day, please? You are on mute.
All right, let me start again. Thank you very much to all of you for participating today. We know that you have many high and competing priorities, plus lots of uncertainties about how those objectives will be accomplished. Our hope is that our key stakeholders and collaborators will work with us more closely to support and assist older adults and people with disabilities within our 2 counties, and that the state and federal legislators will become more familiar with our issues and needs. I'm going to give you a few more statistics here. The Older Americans Act actually provides services for people starting at age 60, and within Josephine and Jackson County, that's about 1/3 of our population. And the fastest growing group across the nation in terms of demographics is the 85+ group. Senior and Disability Services, as you heard, supports caregivers, and those caregivers are usually family members and usually women. As a result of the pandemic, we've already seen the number of women who have dropped out of the workforce to care for their children. Add to that the number of women who are caregivers for older family members. So our work has a significant impact on the economy as well as health and well-being for our target populations. It's all pretty much interrelated. May this dialogue be the beginning of strong advocacy for older adults, people with disabilities, and their families. Thank you very much.